Senator Risch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's an excellent idea, and we do talk with them, and we're pulling the wagon together. But it's best to have this information where we can encourage. First of all, let there be no mistake about this. We really appreciate what you're doing. Arguably, what you're doing is more important than what's happening on the battlefield. The kinds of things that you're doing are the ones that are going to bring Russia to heel. It seems like Putin doesn't mind at all throwing his young men into the meat grinder every day and having the thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of casualties that he has suffered. But the financial aspects of this are something that I suspect mean a whole lot more to him than that. So what you're doing is important. I think part of the frustration here, and the chairman mentioned it, and that is that at the outset we were led to believe, or at least believed one way or another, that we would be more successful in the sanctions. We all know when the sanctions started, there was a big wave, if you would, of things that happened that were obvious to us. 700 companies left the country. I mean, that's significant, obviously, for Russian life. The ruble, as we all know, came close to collapse at the beginning, and now it's back up above where it was from when the war started. So these are the kinds of things that make you wonder, well, wait a second. And we all know, and you have alluded to it, that they have people working full-time every day to avoid the sanctions. I mean, and the longer the sanctions are in place, the more ways around it that they're going to find. One example I can give you is the price cap that we're talking about. Obviously, when it comes to maritime services such as insurance, these are helpful. The problem with that is I'm told that every day they're turning to maritime services that are beyond your reach in countries like China that aren't subject to this or that we can't get. So these are things that I think you need to continue to focus on. Lastly, I think I would stay away from the argument that they're going to older and older technologies. That's a really tough argument to make to the families of the Ukrainian soldiers that were killed by these new Iranian drones that have been brought in. Now they've got an answer for that. They're doing okay with the Stingers in countering these newer Iranian drones that have been brought in. But we need the NASAMS on the battlefield, and now that's not your concern. Obviously, that's in a different lane, but that's something that we're going to continue to work at. But look, they are doing things somewhat differently. I agree with the observation that was made that this whole thing has. What's happened there has totally dissipated Putin's vision, I think, for his imperialism. This war is won already by the Ukrainians. That doesn't mean that the carnage isn't going to go on, but Putin's idea that he could occupy this country and put in a new regime, which was his objective, and then move from there to other countries, this is over. He will never occupy this country. He will go to his grave never having occupied this country. They will fight with broomsticks in the streets if necessary, and all of us have had the opportunity to discuss this with the Ukrainians. They're angry, they're hurt. They are not going to let Putin succeed no matter what. Unfortunately, that doesn't end the carnage. It goes on. But we appreciate what you do. We want to urge you to double your efforts in this regard, because you're the ones that can really help bring this thing to an end. So briefly, I've only got a few minutes left. Your comments, Ambassador O'Brien.
Thank you, Senator. And I appreciate the comments, mostly on behalf of all the people who've been working on this since before I arrived. I met with some of the visiting Ukrainian soldiers, I think, as you did, and you visited the front. They're the real heroes, and they're the ones making the difference. We are providing them with the weapons and technology. I know there'll be a briefing tomorrow by some DoD and state reps to talk about that more. We do feel that the export controls and the sanctions are keeping Russian weapons off. We see their tactics adjust to conserve some of their more advanced weaponry, and that's a clear sign that they can't get more. Now, in that regard, I'd appreciate, you mentioned some delegation of visiting Rostec executives. I'd love it if you'd provide us that information.
Will do.
And we'll work together, and I appreciate the offer to help us as we speak with our allies. A couple of points on how we coordinate and what's happening. To some extent, the divergence is also breadth of coverage, and then we do have to make sure that even if we each hit different targets at different times, we then converge. I think you'll see some convergence relatively soon. But in terms of what comes next, there will be more packages. We are working on more sanctions. Our European colleagues have said they will continue. President von der Leyen, in her State of the EU speech last week, said the sanctions are here to stay, and they're working with us on additional packages. So we'll keep coordinating. Now, what are the areas we'll look at? Everything is on the table. We will work in the financial sector because they have very skilled professionals who are working to move functions from the banks we have designated to others. And so we'll follow them down the chain, try to anticipate where they're moving. They have, we'll look a lot in high tech, especially for energy exploitation and anything that might be dual use for the military. As well as continuing to work on the human rights violators and the soft power that Russia tries to deploy through its disinformation and other areas. So we can go into some more detail on that, but I'm very happy to have any advice or suggestions that you or other members of the committee have. And a final note, you mentioned the Iranian drones, and of course we designated some of those involved in that transaction. But this goes to the strength of the coalition moving forward. We have more than 36 countries, either formally or informally, working with us on export controls, run largely by Department of Commerce and by some of my colleagues at the State Department. We have about the same number of countries that are implementing strong financial sanctions. It's most of the global economy. Still big outliers, as you pointed out, and we need to work on those. Russia is scrounging some help from the DPRK, Iran, maybe Belarus. Not a lot showing up. And I think that goes to show you the strength of the abhorrence that the international community feel toward what Russia's doing. And that is led by President Biden and others. And I know you are really helping in pushing this effort, but let's never forget the strength of the group that we're going forward with.
Thank you.
Again, thanks for your efforts.
Senator Shaheen.